Hey guys, and welcome back to With Unveiled Faces. I'm so glad that you've joined us for week 2. Last week, we began where the Bible begins, right? With beauty and order and the glory of God. We saw God as creator, and we saw that humanity was created to reflect his image, just like a mirror, right? And we saw Jesus as the Word through whom everything was made. And so today we have to move on to the next part of the story, the fracture, because the story of Scripture, unfortunately, doesn't stay in the Garden of Delight. We don't stay in the Garden of Eden. We moved into the place of exile. So to understand Jesus as the one who restores us, we've got to first face all of the ways that humanity turned against him. Genesis 3 opens up with the voice of a serpent. And just like the true nature of a snake, it twists the truth and it encourages disobedience. Eve listens to the voice of the serpent, and then Adam joins her. And together they reach for the one fruit that God said to leave alone. This wasn't just about eating an apple, like a lot of Bible books, like children's Bible books show. This wasn't just about eating a piece of fruit. Eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil represented something much deeper. It represents the choice to define what is good or evil for ourselves instead of trusting God's knowledge of good and evil. This is why it's not just a tree of knowledge. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's humanity saying, we don't actually need God to tell us what's good or evil. We want to decide the knowledge of good and evil for ourselves. And we're going to eat the fruit of that. It was the first time that humans reached for control, taken into their own hands what belongs to God alone, the authority to define good and evil. And in that act, something inside of humanity fractured, right? The image of God remained, but now it was like this twisted, distorted, cracked mirror version. So that calling that we were given to reflect his beauty, to steward his creation, to walk in an unbroken relationship with him, it was all disordered by selfishness and shame and fear. And then if you know the story, you'll notice what happens next is Adam and Eve immediately try to go and hide. They sew fig leaves together to try to cover themselves, and they run and hide from the very presence of God that they were created to enjoy. And then God comes walking in the garden, and he's not like angry and full of wrath, right? Instead, he comes and he asks a question. He says, "Where are you? Where are you?" And honestly, if you know anything about God, then you know that's a question that he still asks to this day. It is not the voice of condemnation. It's the voice of a loving father who is seeking after his lost children. From the very beginning, God has been the one who pursues us. Notice in the very first situation that this happens, that God moves towards Adam and Eve in their shame. And Jesus carries that same heart even today. Remember, in the New Testament, Jesus, he tells stories of shepherds who leave the 99 to go search after the one. Jesus would eat with tax collectors and adulterers. He would touch the paralyzed and the lepers. He always welcomes the sinners and the broken and the unclean. So that tells you the nature of our God from the very beginning is that he always moves towards those who are hiding and in shame. He never moves away from that. Adam and Eve tried to cover themselves with these fig leaves, but God himself decided to cover them with garments of animal skin. Now, for that to happen, an animal had to die, right? It was the very first sacrifice, a shadow that's actually pointing towards Jesus, the Lamb who would one day cover us fully and finally. So notice, like from the very beginning, from Genesis, that God was showing his heart. Mercy is always going to cost him something. He never exposes to humiliate. It's always to heal. He restores our dignity. So The thing about this episode in Genesis is sin did not just fracture individuals, right? It's not just about Adam and Eve. It fractured the entire universe or the cosmos, rupturing heaven and earth, tearing heaven and earth apart, tearing the presence of God away from the earth. And it also drove humanity from the presence that we were designed for. And all of creation felt this. All of creation groaned under the weight of this sin, under the weight of this fracture. And then came the curse of that fall. This is called the fall of Adam and Eve and the curse that comes with it. And what happened is creation itself, literally the ground itself, was broken. Work became hard manual labor and toil. Relationships naturally began to be bent towards strife and self-centeredness. And worst of all, death, actual death, which was never supposed to be part of God's good creation or his plan. Death entered the story. Human nature was distorted. It was bent inward, and that brokenness has been passed down to all of us. Humans are now born with sin nature inside of us. And this is why that sense of exile, the ultimate exile, it aches inside of every human soul. We are east of Eden. We are longing for the home that we lost. And we all know this longing, right? It's that strange, homesickness that you feel when beauty or like a sacred moment takes your breath away. Maybe the first time you're holding, your child for the first time, even things in nature, a beautiful sunset, moments that are sacred, and then they disappear. And you have this deep longing, this homesickness. You didn't get the fulfillment of that moment. A Christian author named C.S. Lewis, he actually wrote about that. He said that the beauty and that sacredness of this world, that the things that come through music or books or memories or even nature outside, he said that's not actually the thing itself. That those things are like an echo of a song that we haven't fully heard. It's like the scent of a flower that we've never actually seen, or news from a country that we've never actually visited. That's why beauty, true sacredness in this life, it cultivates a longing in us. It's not just human pleasure, right? It's a reminder that we were made for more. We were made for the full fulfillment of those moments, right? For God's presence, the true fulfillment of everything beautiful in this world. So the real gospel is that Jesus came not only to rescue us out of exile, but to reverse the curse of the fall itself, to heal all human nature, to restore creation, and to make heaven and earth one again. Jesus' scars, they're not just like signs of his suffering, right? It's signs of pursuit. That's what his scars are. They are the signs of pursuit after humanity. It's proof that he came all the way into our wreckage to restore our home. The story of the fall and the curse of the fall, it's not just about Adam and Eve. It's about us. And why is that? Because if you're a human being, then you know what it feels like to hide. You know what it feels like to cover ourselves with masks. We know what it's like to hide from God or from other people because of shame. But just like for Adam and Eve, God never abandons us. He will never abandon us, and he has never abandoned us. Even in our hiding, God comes near us. Even in our shame, Jesus offers a covering. Even in our exile, he's preparing restoration and renewal. So, with your group this week, I want to invite you to reflect, or on your own. I want to ask you a few questions. Number one, what does the story of the garden reveal about God's heart towards human failure? Right? What is God like when he witnesses our failures? What is his heart like? What is his motive like? What's he thinking in the back of his head when he sees his children fall? Next, what do you think it means for Jesus to reverse the curse? And by that, I mean the curse of the fall. What does that look like for you personally in your life? Where has maybe you're starting to understand that the curse of the fall of Adam and Eve is actually what drove you to make some mistakes in your life? What would it look like for Jesus to reverse the curse for you personally? And lastly, how does Jesus' pursuit of the lost reshape the way that you view who God is? Now, each week, as I told you last week, we're going to take up this simple rhythm called a practice of beholding. Again, these are just practical ways for you to keep beholding Jesus and letting his Spirit transform you. This week's practice is confession and the prayer of examine. And listen, this is not like a pity party where we sit in our shame either. This is about creating a space to notice where shame or just that feeling of hiding has actually shaped your life and your faith and your relationship with the Lord. I want you to begin this week with confession. Simply just pray, Lord, in this area of my life, this is where I've turned away from you. And then invite Jesus to step towards you and trust that he is stepping towards you to cover you. That's what he's doing. We know what happens when we invite the Spirit of God to rest over darkness and chaos, places without form and void, right? He renews us. The prayer of examine is actually an ancient rhythm that helps us look back over our day. You just ask, where was Jesus present in this day? And where did I resist him? It opens us to his mercy. It teaches us to rest in his covering love. And again, what I'm describing, this is discipleship in practice. Just resting in the process of beholding him. Resting in his mercy, in his pursuit, and his victory over exile. So this week, remember, yes, it's true. Sin, it does fracture. It's still real. And shame does cause us to hide. And exile of all kinds, it's still going to ache inside of us. But Jesus is still pursuing after us. He is still covering us, and he still wants to restore us, every part of us. So next week, we'll see how God's covenant promise begins to unfold, how he calls a people to be his own, how he calls them to carry his blessing out into the entire world. And so as we close today, again, I want us to hear the voice of the early church. I have adapted a prayer from Melito of Sardis from the 2nd century. A lot of people would pray this with him. Here's what he would say. I was lost in the thorns of my sin, but you, Good Shepherd, came down among the thickets. You found me and carried me home on your shoulders.